No Renewal by Spider Robinson. Originally published in the March 1977 issue of Galaxy magazine. Republished in one more magazine, the fall 1994 issue of On Spec, and in two anthologies, Other Canadas in 1979 and the number 80 issue of Science Fiction Stories. It also appeared in three collections of the author's stories: Antinomy in 1980, Melancholy Elephants in 1984, and By Any Other Name in 2001. Read by Darrell T. Smith II for my channel, Quasar Spectra. No Renewal. Douglas Bent, Jr. sits in his kitchen waiting for his tea to heat. It is May 12th, his birthday, and he has prepared wintergreen tea. Douglas allows himself this extravagance because he knows he will receive no birthday present from anyone but himself. By a trick of time and timing, he has outlived all his friends, all his relatives. The concept of neighborliness, too, has predeceased him. Not because he has none, but because he has too many. His may be, for all he knows, the last small farm in Nova Scotia, and it is bordered on three sides by vast, mined-out clay pits, gaping concentric cavities whose inside were scraped out and eaten long ago, their husk thrown away to rot. On the remaining perimeter is an apartment hive, packed with ant-like swarms of people. Douglas knows none of them as individuals. At times, he doubts the trick is possible. Once Douglas's family owned hundreds of acres along what was then called simply the Shore Road. Once the bent spread ran from the Bay of Fundy itself back over the peak of the Great North Mountain, included a sawmill, rushing streams, hundreds of thousands of trees, and acre after acre of pasture and hay and rich farmland. Once the Bents were one of the best-known families from Annapolis Royal to Bridgetown, their livestock the envy of the entire Annapolis Valley. Then the petrochemical industry died of thirst. With it, of course, went the plastics industry. Clay suddenly became an essential substitute, and the Annapolis Valley is mostly clay. Now the Shore Road is the Fundy Trail, 6 lanes of high-speed traffic. The bent spread is 14 acres on the most inaccessible part of the mountain. The sawmill has been replaced by the industrial park that ate the clay. The pasture and the streams and the farmland have been disemboweled or paved over. All the Bents, save Douglas Jr., are dead or moved to the cities, and no one now living in the valley has ever seen a live cow, pig, duck, goat, or chicken, let alone envied them. Agribusiness has destroyed agriculture, and synthoprotein feeds some of the world. Douglas grows only what crops replenish themselves, feeds only himself. He sits waiting for the water to boil, curses for the millionth time the solar-powered electric stove that supplanted the family's wood burner when firewood became impossible to obtain. Electric stoves take too long to heat, call for no tending, perform their task with impersonal callousness. They do not warm a room. Douglas's gnarled fingers idly sort through the wintergreen he picked this morning, spurn the jar of sugar that stands nearby. All his life, Douglas has made wintergreen tea from fresh maple sap, which requires no sweetening. But this spring he journeyed with drill and hammer and tap and bucket to his only remaining maple tree, and found it dead. He has bought maple-flavored sugar for this birthday tea, but he knows it will not be the same. Then again, next spring he may find no wintergreen. So many old familiar friends have failed to reappear in their season lately. The deer moss has gone wherever the hell the deer went to. Crows no longer raid the compost heap. Even the lupins have decreased in number and in brilliance. The soil, perhaps made self-conscious by its conspicuous isolation, no longer bursts with life. Douglas realizes that his own sap no longer runs in the spring, that the walls of his house ring with no voice save his own. If a farm surrounded by wasteland cannot survive, how then shall a man? It is my birthday, he thinks. How old am I today? He cannot remember. He looks up at the goddamn electric clock. The family's 200-year-old cuckoo clock, being wood, did not survive the panic winter of '94. Reads the date from its face. There are no longer trees to spare for fripperies like paper calendars. Sits back with a grunt. 2049. Like I thought, but when was I born? So many things have changed in Douglas's lifetime. So many of life's familiar, immutable aspects gone forever. The Danielses to the east died childless. Their land now holds a sewage treatment plant. On the west, the creeping border of Annapolis Royal has eaten the land up, excreting concrete and steel and far too many people as it went. Annapolis is now as choked as New York City was in Douglas's father's day. Economic helplessness has driven Douglas back up the North Mountain step by inexorable step, and the profits, he winces at the word, that he reaped from selling off his land parcel by parcel, as in his youth he bought it from his ancestors, have been eaten away by the rising cost of living. Here, on his last 14 acres, in the 2-story house he built with his own hands and, by Jesus, wood, Douglas Bent Jr. has made his last stand. He questions his body as his father taught him to do, is told in reply that he has at least 10 or 20 more years of life left. How old am I? He wonders again. 45? 50? More? He has simply lost track, for the years do not mean what they did. It matters little, though he may have vitality for 20 years more, he has money for no more than 5. Less if the new tax laws penalizing old age are pushed through in Halifax. The water has begun to boil. Douglas places wintergreen and sugar in the earthenware mug his mother made, back when clay was dug out of the backyard with a shovel, removes the pot from the stove, and pours. His nostrils test the aroma. To his dismay, the fake smells genuine. Sighing from his belly, he moves to the rocking chair by the kitchen window, places the mug on the sill, and sits down to watch another sunset. From here, Douglas can see the bay, when the wind is right and the smoke from the industrial park does not come between. Even then, he can no longer see the far shores of New Brunswick, for the air is thicker than when Douglas was a child. The goddamn clock hums. The mug steams. The winds are from the north. A cold night is coming, and tomorrow may be one of the improbable bay steamer days with which Nova Scotia salts its spring. It does not matter to Douglas. His solar heating is far too efficient. His gaze wanders down the access road which leads to the highway. It curves downhill and left and disappears behind the birch and alders and pine that line it for a half-mile from the house. If Douglas looks at the road right, he can sometimes convince himself that around the bend are not strip mining shells and brick apartment hives, but arable land, waving grain, and the world he once knew. Fields and yaller dogs and grazing goats and spring mud and tractors and barns and goat berries like stockpiles of BB shot. Douglas's mind wanders a lot these days. It has been a long time since he enjoyed thinking, and so he had lost the habit. It has been a long time since he had anyone with whom to share his thoughts, and so he has lost the inclination. It has been a long time since he understood the world well enough to think about it, and so he has lost the ability. Douglas sits and rocks and sips his tea, spilling it down the front of his beard and failing to notice. How old am I? He thinks for the third time, and summons enough will to try and find out. Rising from the rocker with an effort, he walks on weary, wiry legs to the living room, climbs the stairs to the attic, pausing halfway to rest. My father was 61, he recalls as he sits, wheezing, when he accepted euthanasia. Surely I am not that old. What keeps me alive? He has no answer. When he reaches the attic, Douglas spends 15 minutes in locating the ancient trunk in which bent family records are kept. They are minutes well spent. Douglas is cheered by many of the antiques he must shift to get at the trunk. Here is the potter's wheel his mother worked. There, the head of the axe with which he once took off his right big toe. Over in the corner, a battered peavey from the long-gone sawmill days. They remind him of a childhood when life still made sense and bring a smile to his grizzled features. It does not stay long. Opening the trunk presents difficulties. It is locked, and Douglas cannot remember where he put the key. He has not seen it for many years, or the trunk, for that matter. Finally, he gives up, smashes the old lock with the peavey, and levers up the lid. The Bents have always learned leverage as they got old, working efficiently long after strength is gone. It opens with a shriek, hinges protesting their shattered sleep. The past leaps out at him like the woes of the world from Pandora's box. On the top of the pile is a picture of Douglas's parents, Douglas Sr. and Sarah, smiling on their wedding day. Grandfather Lester behind them near an enormous barn, grazing cattle visible in the background. Beneath the picture, he finds a collection of receipts for paid grain bills, remembers the days when food was cheap enough to feed animals, and there were animals to be fed. Digging deeper, he comes across canceled checks, insurance policies, tax records, a collection of report cards and letters wrapped in ribbon. Douglas pulls up short at the handmade rosary he gave his mother for her 15th anniversary and wonders if either of them still believed in God even then. Again, it is hard to remember. At last he locates his birth certificate. He stands, groaning with the ache in his calves and knees, and threads his way through the crowded attic to the west window, where the light from the setting sun is sufficient to read the fading document. He seats himself on the shell of a television that has not worked since he was a boy, holds the paper close to his face, and squints. May 12th, 1989, reads the date at the top. Why, I'm 50 years old, he tells himself in wonderment. 50! I'll be damned. There is something about the number that rings a bell in Douglas's tired old mind, something he can't quite recall about what it means to be 50 years old. He squints at the birth certificate again, and there on the last line he sees it, sees what he had almost forgotten, and realizes that he was wrong. He will be getting a birthday present today after all. For the bottom line of his birth certificate says, simply and blessedly, expiry date, May 12th, 2049. Downstairs, for the first time in years, there is a knock at the door. You've been listening to pre-1990s speculative fiction readings with a highlight on science fiction by Darrell T. Smith II. Please consider clicking the donation link in the description box. Thank you so much for your time and your imagination.